come up on our screen, and we have to hit got it. Okay, welcome all of you. Glad to have you here. I'm going to be the chair for this meeting. Our first discussion is about the competing petitions on street repair. And members of our group have been at least leaning toward one or the other. And a lot of us have not decided and would like to get more information. So I know that Margot and Sally had views. Kate is unable to join us. She had another meeting. Holly may be unable to join us because she's canvassing for the guy who's running against Valadeo. So she said she might be able to tune in or not. Others of us can talk about the others. So I thought maybe we could start. Is Sally here? And I don't see her.
I saw her a minute ago.
And Mark, oh, there's Sally. Sally, do you want to talk about?
I'm here, but my brain has been otherwise occupied all day, so maybe Margot should start.
Okay, she's had to go off for.
Well, she's here.
Back.
She's here now.
Back. Oh, there you are, Margot. Yeah. Do you want to talk briefly about fix the streets and sidewalks?
Yes, I lean towards fix the street and sidewalks because in this initiative, it spells out where the money goes and who's in charge. And it is very, very specific about how one goes about fixing the streets and sidewalks. And there's a very strong group of Berkeley people behind it. And I prefer it for that reason. And I'd like to have you here, Jim McGrath, who's the author of the, one of the authors of the initiative, tell you about it in detail. He's been in charge of Berkeley for Better Planning. I'm not saying this right, am I? Berkeley for Better Planning, which is another group that's trying to improve Berkeley at the grassroots level. And this is one of their initiatives. So Jim, would you take it from here?
I'd be happy to, and that was close enough. We're Berkeleyans for Better Planning, and I'll share my screen. And I'll give you a little bit of background on who I am. I've been involved in environmental work for 50 years. I began working on infrastructure here in Berkeley in about 2012. And headed up the campaign for the increase in the parks tax in 2014 and the increase the T1 bond in 2016. I also headed up the campaign against Measure L, which was a $650 million bond. And there's a reason for that. We have a strange combination of a direct budget and a representative budget here in California. We are a representative democracy. So each year the council adopts a budget. And last July, they adopted a budget that's worth $718 million, allocated $718 million. That's a lot of money. And I understand that we work and live in a representative democracy. But when you come to ask the citizens for more money for a purpose, and particularly for something that many people think should be ordinary way of doing business, I think you should be very specific about that. So that's what we did here. So we're a group of grassroots people. We've been around. I've been around Berkeley for since '67. Now I have to figure out how to make this thing go down. Oh, come on.
Click 2.
Right beside the one there, I see a little arrow pointing in one direction or the other. What happens if you hit that arrow?
usually just page down. There it goes.
There you go.
So that's about us. We were formed to to oppose Measure L. But all our supporters wanted us to come back and come back with a measure that we thought was more responsible. So you can see here, one of the sidewalks, which is one of the purposes of this. We filed the measure with the city. Was harder than I thought. We need a little under 2,900 valid signatures by May, sometime in May, and we're gathering them. So some facts. Underinvestment's been going on for a long time. For many years, the city only put about 1.9 million a year. And as the budget doubled, 1.9 million a year was all they put into streets. They put even less into sidewalks. It was 32,000 one year when we looked. So first we urged the city to increase the budget, and they did. They increased it from 1.9 to about 8 million. There is more money that comes from county and state taxes. Unless further money is put in, the current backlog will go down. And I have one of the things that's difficult about doing a PowerPoint is the little controls go right in the middle of your thing. So so we looked at the backlog, we looked at the city commitment, and we put together a measure that would fix it. And we'll also do some other things. Now it doesn't want to. So our take, crumbling streets are unsafe. They're unsafe for everyone. I'm a bicyclist. I'm 75. I'm a bicyclist. My wife is a bicyclist too, although she's on a tricycle. And that pavement is not just unsafe for pedestrians and damaging to cars, but it's very unsafe for a bicycle. If you're riding on a street like that, you have to look down rather than at traffic. So we want to fix those. And if there's going to be other things, other fancy infrastructure, it should be really good. So our viewpoint is that streets and sidewalks should be safe and accessible to all users. And good paving on all streets promotes bicycling and walking. We drive, and there are a lot of people who drive. We deserve good road conditions, especially if we're going to ask the 80% of people in the city who own cars to help pay for it. The idea of keeping streets in bad shape to deter driving, which was one of the commentaries, that just boggles my mind. I almost went down on a bicycle boulevard on Channing coming down from Telegraph because I hit a pothole. So what the measure is, it's 13 cents per square foot, which exempts low income property owners. It's only exists for 12 years. And the budgets that we saw and the reports from the outside consultants indicate that would raise sufficient revenue if the council continues its commitment to fix all our streets, sidewalks, pedestrian paths, and improve our bicycle boulevards. No unplanned measures. The details, it requires the city to maintain its recently increased street maintenance budget. If they don't, tax goes away. It brings every street, including streets in the waterfront, to at least a good condition, not just good on average. It cleans up stormwater runoff pollution. I was over on Hopkins today, and I looked to my left, and there was Cordonices Creek. We need to keep that creek in as good a condition as we can. It improves the safety of our low-stress bicycle boulevard network, and it fully funds sidewalks and pathway repairs. It establishes an independent commission, increases oversight, requires evaluation of what we're trying to do, and the like. This is a side-by-side comparison of the two measures, 13 cents versus 17 cents, quite a bit more for commercial property. And our concern there, we've been criticized for that. Our concern there was it's been a hard 3 years for restaurants. One of the great joys in Berkeley is the fact that it's got 350 restaurants. They provide us all with an opportunity, many times by walking, and but they do rely on parking, and it's been tough enough on them. The total revenue, 153 versus 267. It is very specific. It brings every street to at least good condition. And it's important to note that that one thing that we set out to do, and this was recommended by a member of Walk Bike Berkeley, is fix the sidewalks. People get hurt on sidewalks all the time. It prioritizes bicycle boulevard improvements, and it quadruples the budget for traffic calming on those streets. It's got an evaluation and transparency measures that were significantly greater than anyone else, than the city usually has done. I want to reemphasize in conclusion 3 points. And that's safety. This is a picture of Channing Boulevard. I took a picture of that. That's exactly what we're interested in. That's a bicycle path below Martin Luther King. It used to be alligator land. Now it's nice and smooth. It's the priority that was given. And now this street is heavily used by bicycles. And you can see the barrier there that keeps cars out of there. So I think there's some misunderstanding about safety. There's 3 elements of safety here that are very important to us. First, fix all the sidewalks. Don't rely on homeowners and the city's enforcement process to get them fixed. People get hurt on sidewalks all the time. Fix them. Second, we included funding for pedestrian safety. I mean, maybe some people don't realize that, but there's a Vision Zero program with some recommendations. We put in about 50% of that money, knowing that some of it's already been done and that there's funding available from the Alameda County Transportation Authority. Finally, and as a bicyclist, I say this, I ride all over the city. I like going in different places. Bicycles should be safe to ride on every street. But if I've got a choice, I stay off busy streets. Bicycle boulevards ideal. They get you within a block or 2 of everywhere you want to go. You need safe paving on them and traffic calming. So those are the 3 safety measures. Not everybody recognizes them as safety. Now, if I can figure out to stop sharing. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Thank you. Since Holly's not here, I'm wondering, Ben Gould, do you want to speak on the highlights of the safe streets?
Yeah, I'd love to, Zippy. Thank you. I have to leave my video off as I have a back injury, so I can't sit up or stand, unfortunately, right now. But if it's okay, I'll go ahead and sort of go through a little bit of our presentation. I think it's the one that I have ready to go wasn't prepared for this shorter meeting, so I'll just sort of skim through it if that's okay.
Sure.
Can everyone see my screen here? Looks like yes.
Yeah.
So I'll just sort of go through briefly. So Berkeley Citizens for Safe Streets got started, same impetus as Jim's group, looking to fix the streets and sidewalks and make sure everything's safe for all road users. We have a very diverse coalition. We're proud to have a lot of support from former Yes on L people, former No on L people, current and former elected officials, commissioners, Berkeley Firefighters Association, UAW, and we're a very broad coalition. Our measure looks to fix the streets and sidewalks together and at the same time implement essential traffic safety improvements to benefit all road users. We also want to enhance the environmental sustainability and climate resilience of our public infrastructure and transform Berkeley's future into one where it's safe, easy, and fun to get around regardless of age, mobility, or mode choice. We've talked about the issues with the streets, so I'll skip over that. We know that safety is a really big issue in Berkeley. Just in the past couple of weeks, we've had multiple people seriously injured or killed due to dangerous intersections, and our streets really aren't designed for the vehicles we see on them today, right? When they were designed 100 years ago, we didn't have all these SUVs and lifted trucks and cell phones and other distractions and other issues we have. So we do think it's really important that when we rebuild our streets to make design changes so that they are safe for all road users and resilient in a changing climate. So
I'm gonna
our
make,
measure includes funding for safety improvements, things like narrowed crosswalks, so it's a shorter crossing distance, elevated crosswalks to slow down traffic and improve visibility, flashing beacons, bulb outs. We also expand that to include things like street lighting and wildfire evacuation routes. We have improved response time for emergency vehicles so they can get to accidents faster and other health issues, and speed limit signs and other kinds of things like that. We include money for resiliency enhancements, things like bioswales, permeable pavement, street trees, and benches in public park plazas areas, like parklets, and we think this is all important because these work together. Whenever we're doing repaving or fixing the sidewalks, we want to make sure that we're doing it right for the long-term future of Berkeley, not just doing what was done before, because that's the way things have always been done. We know that looking forward, we're going to have different needs in the future. So we want to make sure that when we're doing this repair and reconstruction, we're able to incorporate those expected needs. All of the funding from our measure must be spent consistent with an adopted city plan or policy. So we don't have any unallocated funding or undefined uses, right? It's all has to be based on existing plans like the Vision 2050 framework, the current street paving policy, the pavement management plans, the Vision Zero, pedestrian plans, safe routes to schools plans, and so forth. And so we aren't specifying which of these plans have to be implemented. We're saying pick the priorities from these plans. We have a public outreach and engagement process. And so we're helping, we're leaving some space for city council and the public to say, look, these plans may have been written 5-10 years ago. Today, here's the most important from these plans that's consistent with these plans. Let's make sure these parts get done first from the community. Just briefly, these are very specific plans. It's not vague and undefined. The safe routes to schools is very specific intersection improvements, specific items, add in a crosswalk here, add in flashing lights, add in a traffic signal here. Same with pedestrian plan and bicycle plan. We have oversight and accountability, and I think I will leave it at that because I know we have limited time for questions and we want to get to the other things on the agenda as well. So that's the highlight of our approach, I think. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, good. Kelly, you have a question.
Yeah, one of the things that wasn't brought up, Jim McGrath, maybe you could answer average versus the total street.
I didn't hear that. What versus what?
Well, one of the measure with Ben Gould has like the average PCI, and the other one has the total. So maybe Jim, you could explain that.
I've read these things so many times that there's two things that I think could lead to that. First of all, there's no firm commitment in the measure that Ben's talking about to fix all streets. It requires fixing all streets that are below 50, I think is the matter. So if there's a street that's 50-55, which means it needs some work, that street could be bypassed so that money could be put into some other measure. And I think that's the critical factor, that the measure that we drafted has a commitment to bring all streets up to at least 70, not an average of 70.
Ben, would you like to say anything about that?
Yeah, I'd love to speak to that as well. Thank you. So I think it's important to remember that both measures are giving the city money to fund street repair, right? So it's not like I'll be paving streets or Jim will be paving streets, right? The city's doing the paving no matter what. And in the Berkeley Better Planning measure, I believe it has about 52 million allocated, or I think around 36% of the money allocated for street paving. And the Safe Streets measure has about 110 million allocated for street paving, about 45% of the measure. We came up with our estimates based upon the city's September 2023 pavement management plan update, which said that it would cost about 320 million to get to a citywide average PCI of 70. At the time we were doing the measure, there was no estimates available from the city for what would it take to bring every street to PCI of 70 or higher. That would probably mean an average PCI of about 85. It's going to be between 70 and 100, so average PCI of about 85. We think that would cost a lot more than either measure has. So while we recognize the BFBP measure has specific items in there about which streets get paved first, the worst ones get paved first, going up, from PCI up sub 25, then 25 to 50, and so on. Safe Streets has twice as much money for paving, and the city is doing the paving either way. So It doesn't seem to us like BFBP measure will actually achieve a guaranteed every street will have PCI above 70, but that's what their measure says it'll aim to achieve, I believe.
Okay, Margot.
I see, Ben, that you just sort of slipped by the oversight slide. And that's one of the things that I have problems with, because in Save Streets, all of the money goes into the jurisdiction of the general fund and the city manager. And I fear that some of the money will not end up repairing the streets. The Fix the Streets, on the other hand, has an oversight board that monitors where the money actually goes. Would you two, both of you, like to address that?
I'll let Ben go first.
Jim, go first. Yeah.
Sure, I can, address that. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate the question. And I can read that slide up. It wasn't designed to discuss the items that Jim was bringing up, but I'll just show you what we had there. So in Safe Streets, our approach, we sort of see the money coming into the city, and then we have a few approaches for allocating the money. Staff are going to have workshops every few years with the public in order to learn what the public wants to hear. They're going to propose projects based upon, the public input, the city plans, and the requirements of the measure. And then with, the city council will allocate the money and it'll be spent. Our oversight comes from annual reports from the city manager, our Citizen Oversight Commission, which does independent annual reports as well, and the city auditor, which does reports every 3 years reviewing the expenditures. And so those are all public reports, and those three different structures help to ensure that the money that has been spent gets publicized about how it was spent. And, then there's feedback for the public when they come back in a few years to do another round of what's the money going to go to next. Our Citizen Oversight Commission consists of 7 members, 3 of which are appointed by the Transportation Commission and the Environmental Commission directly from their membership, and then 4 members which are appointed by the City Council as a whole. Those 4 people have to have background in sort of transportation planning, public works, financing, public budgeting, so they have some understanding of how to review these documents when they're providing the reports. So that's our oversight approach. When I looked at the Berkeley Better Planning Measure, I didn't see any details in there about the Independent Oversight Committee. It looked like it would be established by council. And so I don't know what the role of that committee is or how it's structured, other than council creates the Independent Oversight Committee. And I'll leave Jim with that.
Okay. Yes, I'd like to hear Jim's explanation.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the question, Margot. The critical factor that we had in mind was the independence of it from the council. I spent about 3 years on the Public Works Commission and watched that the allocation process was just to make sure that there was an equal amount in every district, rather than actually any effort to prioritizing the streets as the streets got into worse and worse and worse condition. So we wanted a level of independence from that. And Ben's correct. We only put an outline of what was there with the independence modeled on the allocation or the aspect of the existing law that creates districts and adjusts them for population changes. So I think there's enough guidance in that and the outline, and it would probably look, except for the independence of the commission, a lot like Ben's proposal. But we think that independence is critical. There's another measure in there that's really important. And one of the questions that Nico asked before we all came online was there any effort between this? Well, I actually started with Ben's first draft, and I took out the things that I didn't agree with and rewrote some of those that I thought were a pretty good start and the like. And then we spent months negotiating. So we're pretty clear where those breakdowns were over. And there were some pretty significant reforms that we wanted in this. One was the city to be required to continue funding. The other was an independent oversight committee. And the third was a requirement to monitor outcomes. If we're going to do things like cycle tracks, which are divisive and very, very expensive, we want to know whether or not they're working. We want to measure the outcomes. I'm pretty sure, because I ride around 3 or 4 days a week in Berkeley, that you've got more bicyclists on the new pavement on Channing than you do on any other fancy measures. But that's just my opinion. What we need to do is monitor the outcomes. Those are missing in the Safer Streets measure. The independence and the monitoring of outcomes, gone. It's not that they didn't know about them.
I have a follow-up on that. So if you just keep saying it's independent, who appoints it? What's the process of gathering this so-called independent thing if the council is not involved and the city commissions are not involved? I mean, those are representative of the voters, those two bodies.
There's the couple things, Zipporah. First of all, the council has the last cut at all of this. The citizen initiative does not have the ability to directly make a budget for it. That's always going to be the city. But what we thought that it was important to have a level of independence from the council and get a recommendation. It would be maybe a little harder for them to put their thumb on. And I think we've all seen some thumbs on the scales in the last couple of years. I mean, I could grab the measure and try to give you what details we had. We didn't, I mean, Ben's correct. We didn't spell it out in tremendous detail beyond the independence in the model.
Okay.
So if I can chime in here. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen. I have it up if anyone's curious. So this is the Berkeleyans for Better Planning website. This is their item. And this is the paragraph where it establishes the Independent Oversight Commission. It says the initiative shall create an Independent Oversight Commission per new chapter in the city charter. And the Berkeley City Council shall use Municipal Code 2.1, which references the Citizens Redistricting Commission, the Independent Redistricting Commission document, and the bylaws of the Berkeley Independent Redistricting Commission to create the commission. So I think what Jim was trying to do here is to say that the members of the commission are appointed by lottery, like the Independent Redistricting Commission is as well. That's the language that's provided in the measure. I don't know if Jim, you wanted to add anything to that, or if I'm missing something.
No, that's correct. That's the outline.
Great.
And the model.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to add that Jim was just discussing is the oversight and the outcomes measure monitoring, right? And so I think that's what you had in this section A above, right, Jim? You know, where you say the evaluation provisions of the Berkeley Complete Streets Policy should be followed each year, and then develop a baseline of use and metrics, and form annual evaluation of expenditures. So we had a couple of thoughts on this. One, we didn't think it was necessary to reiterate existing city policy without an effective or an enforcement mechanism. So that wasn't a priority for us. We did also have an item already in our measure, and this is the Berkeley Citizens for Safe Streets language, that would require the city manager to include an annual report of performance metrics, outcomes, and accomplishments with specific items spelled out as to what that would include. So we were clear on what those performance metrics are, such as safety projects implemented, fatal and severe injuries over time, changes in trip modality, and other progress on streets paved and so forth. So we do have a lot of the similar oversight measures that Jim had. I think we just spelled out our oversight commission in a lot more detail. Here's the section we have on the oversight committee discussing how it's structured, how it meets, and that it has to provide an annual report. And so there's nothing in Jim's measure that says an annual report has to come up from the independent commission, but that's of course up to city council to include.
Okay, Kelly, and then after that, Margot, and then Jack. That's the order I saw you in. I hope you can be patient. Okay, Kelly.
Maybe Jack should go first because I've already talked once.
That's very kind. Go ahead. Keep your hand up too, to remind me. Unmute, Jack.
So here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that the initiative being put forward by Jim, and I am nominally on the steering committee of that operation, is for a specific accountable purpose, the paving of streets. That's it. Paving of streets.
And sidewalks.
And
And sidewalks and
and
paths.
sidewalks.
And
I'm sorry,
paths.
yeah. And so there's accountability built in to the measure. Here is what the money is for. You can't spend it on anything else. The initiative put forward by Ben does not have a specific set of guidelines as to what the money can be spent for. And it seems to me, and it goes all over the place as to what the money can be spent for. So it seems to me that on that account, there is an inherent structural inaccountability because there's no specific purpose for the money. And that's very bothersome to me,
Okay.
much more than the composition and of whatever oversight committee is.
Mhm.
One says, here's what you can use the money for. The other one says, oh, here are 12 things that you can use the money for. And I'm kind of done with that in Berkeley.
Okay, let's let Ben and Jim respond to that.
Sure, I can go ahead and go first on that.
Go
So,
ahead.
Jack, I mean, obviously, I don't feel that's accurate. I think the language in the two measures about what the money can be spent on is actually pretty similar. The main difference is the amount of money, and I think, you know, you're correct that we have more things that the money can be spent on, but that doesn't change that it's very restricted. So, again, here's our measure, and here we, you know, specify that tax proceeds should be allocated as follows: 60% for streets and sidewalks, of which 3/4 or 45% is for streets, and 1/4 or 15% is for sidewalks. We have 30% for safety improvements, and then 10% for other environmental enhancements and other permitted uses. We do spell out all permitted uses in this section above, which is very similar to the language in the Berkeley for Better Planning measure. Proceeds of the tax should be placed in a special fund, not the general fund, to be used only for the purposes of enhancing streets, sidewalks, and paths through the following types of projects, which are repair, repaving, and reconstruction, safety improvements, and environmental enhancements. We have a few other things like you can use it for staff time and the city auditor. You can improve processes for delivering projects. We recognize public art is part of a requirement right now in city funding, so we recognize that. We have the carve out on Hopkins Street for bicycle lanes to prevent this money from being used for bike lanes on Hopkins. And we have specific goals. And, you know, I'll just go ahead and tab over to the other measure. It looks very similar because, as Jim said, we started with the same draft, right? So they have the same kind of allocation and funding priorities: 36% of the funds to street repair, 35% to sidewalks, you know, about 20% to, or yeah, this looks 20% to pedestrian and safety measures, and then 10% for other enhancements. And it's the same kind of language that may be used to pay for city staff costs with specific goals. So I think the two measures are pretty similar. It's just the difference is that we have more money overall for safety and for streets and for environmental enhancements, and we have more uses that those safety and environmental enhancements can go towards. So that's what I see the difference as around the funding piece, and I'll let Jim speak to that further.
Well, thanks for the question, Jack. I don't agree with the characterization. And some of it has to do with how you structure something and how broad the definitions are. So as Ben has laid out, there are 8 to 10 different plans in the city, some of which are old, some of which have specific aspects to them, some of which have requirements for studies before they're implemented, and so forth. The way it's structured in the breadth of the definition, a tremendous amount of the money that putatively goes to fix streets and sidewalks can go to any one of those plans. Among those plans, included in those plans, are 19.6 miles of new cycle tracks. Now, cycle tracks are supposed to have a certain process by them. And, you know, I'm not a big fan of cycle tracks in many places. In some places, I think they do make sense, but I think that's a brush that shouldn't be spread too broadly. So that's way different than fixing the safety of the pavement. There is nothing there that allocates how priorities are selected. And that carries over into the monitoring and the outcome. And that's, I'm going to stress again why outcome monitoring is important. If we're going to try and do, as Nancy's used the definition, fancy infrastructure, we want to make sure that it's working. We want to make sure that people use it. So we want to actually find out before we allocate what's money, and before we talk about our oversight as effective, we want to see what's working and making sure that we're using priorities. What are the highest priority safety projects? They should go first, and the like. The monitoring and the oversight that Ben has proposed, very similar to what the city proposed as an afterthought in Measure L. And it just basically says, did you spend the money on one of the allocated purposes? Not, is it working? And should we reinvest and do more of that? And with 19.6 miles of new cycle tracks in their wish list, among other things, that was a step too far for us.
Okay. Let's have Margot, and I think we have more items on the agenda, and I was hoping that this discussion might wind up by 6. We've run over that already. So I think I'll say Margot has the last question, and we'll move on. I thank all the people, you, Jim and Ben, and I see David Fielder came. So I really appreciate your coming to help clarify. And I would emphasize again, we can discuss via email amongst ourselves any further things. We can enlighten each other. We can decide to sign one or the other or both petitions. And we have lots of time before the election to try to hash out where each of us stands on this issue. So go ahead, Margot.
Well, thank you very much. I would like to hear what Kelly had to say, because she's always has good points.
Yeah, she's lowered her hand, so I assume that meant, Kelly, that your question was more or less answered, or you're being restrained.
I'm gonna restrain because you know, I have kind of a broad view of the city from going to all the city meetings.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead, Margot.
I was going to say about the safe street that it really bothers me. And what really bothers me about a lot of things that is going on in the city right now is the fact that the city manager makes a lot of the decisions. And if you read what Ben Gould showed us, it was the city manager does this and the city manager does that and the city manager does the other thing. And that really makes me very, very nervous, because she'll take some of the money and she'll hire a consultant to do this, and she'll hire a consultant to do that, and she'll slow things down that she wants to slow down, and speed things up the things that she wants to speed up, and there's no guarantee that things will happen, and the goals of Save the Streets are, I sort of feel like motherhood and apple pie. Everything is going to be wonderful for everybody. But what I like about the Fix the Street things is they're very specific about what they're going to do and how they're going to do it.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. And I think we'll move on. We have some people not from Berkeley who I said, you know, you can join around 6 and we'll move on to the things that you're more interested in. So we're going to move along there. And if any of you, the guests, want to stay, that's fine. If you feel free to, you should feel free to leave, because we won't discuss this further tonight. We'll probably discuss it by email, and we'll probably discuss it in future meetings. Thank you.
Thanks
Okay.
for having us.
Sure.
For
We're
opportunities.
glad you could join us. Next on the agenda, if I can find my